So now you come down to where we are today. And you have North Dakota as living proof that, in fact, we have tremendous quantities of oil. And so I've been advocating that we have an American energy program so that we become the leading oil producer in the world, so that no American president ever again bows to a Saudi king. And the result of that has been that people have started to pay attention. And about 10 days ago, the president's political advisor said to him, you know, this is really dangerous. I'm told, for example, that gasoline here this morning was $4.25. Well, at $4.25, we're on the edge of breaking the economy because people will use all of their discretionary income to buy gasoline or to buy diesel fuel. And so it really begins to be a real problem. So about 2 weeks ago, the president began making a series of energy speeches in which he said that there is no silver bullet, which is just not true. Of course there's a silver bullet. It's called drilling. But then he went on to say, sort of doubling down on his bet, that drilling is not the answer. And then he gave us what he said the answer was. Do any of you remember what the president's answer was? Algae, right? I mean, didn't you love it? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is a Saturday Night Live skit pretending to be the president. So we're thinking this summer of having volunteers go to gas stations with jars of algae and offering the Obama solution when people pull in to buy gasoline. Now, and let me be clear, I am for science and technology. I am for biofuels. I believe over time this research will be useful. I know a guy at Texas A&M who's doing fascinating work, but it is not a practical solution in the near future. And to suggest that drilling won't work, but that algae will, is just simply an act of I think, absolute ideological irrationality. But what made the president's speech fascinating was he then went on 2 pages later, and it's worth you reading this because it's hard to believe he could have given this in the same speech. He went on to explain that we've had a huge breakthrough in natural gas, which is, by the way, absolutely true. We've now found, because of the same breakthrough in technology, we've now found that where we thought we had only 7 years supply left and we were going to bring natural gas into the United States, liquid natural gas in the Middle East, we now have 125 years supply, and we're planning to export liquid natural gas to China. All this has happened literally in the last 10 years. Now, the first thing I want you to think about, because this is why I think I'm very different than the other candidates. Washington, D.C. has spent 40 years preaching scarcity. We're going to run out of oil, we're going to run out of natural gas, we've got to do something quickly because after all we're not going to have any left. And now all of a sudden we're faced with a 125-year supply. And nobody in Washington wants to stop and think. In either party, frankly, it's an enormous problem because both parties get so locked into repeating whatever they've memorized that it's very difficult to get them to think. And yet, this is a revolution. This is such an explosion of capability that you really have to stop and take a deep breath and say, this just wipes out all the assumptions on energy of the last 40 years because the new technologies are so powerful and they're doing so well. Now, what happens when you break through and you produce that much natural gas? Well, we've had an 11% increase in natural gas production since 2008, and guess what happened to the price? It has crashed. If gasoline dropped by the same amount as natural gas, it would be $1.13 a gallon. That's literally, this isn't, to the president, press secretary, comments, etc. This is not a political statement. This is a historian statement. If you look at what's happened to natural gas for the last 4 years, it has dropped at a rate which would be, the parallel for gasoline would be about $1.13 a gallon. Now that's a fact. The White House may not want to admit it, they may not want to deal with it, but that's a fact. And the interesting thing is, since the president has assured us that drilling does not work, you have to raise the question, and I've really actively tried, in fact we're thinking about sending a letter to the White House press corps. I'm trying to get some reporter to go up to the president and say, how do you think they found the natural gas? Right. By drilling. So here you have a president who in one speech can tell you drilling won't work, and by the way, he's really proud of drilling working. And he goes on to say that we have so much natural gas now, that, and this is his number, not mine, that it'll create 600,000 new jobs the next decade. Now, my point to you is simply, this is a revolution in thinking. And let me show you what it leads to. If we had a president who was prepared to be active, there are three things you could do today. Because while he may not have a silver bullet, he has a presidential pen. And he could sign three documents. First, he could approve the Keystone Pipeline, which would bring 700,000 barrels a day of Canadian oil to Houston. And the Keystone Pipeline also puts us in a very good position to be able to have oil come from North Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and East Texas at a much lower cost. I was told in Oklahoma City it would save $6 to $8 a barrel to be able to deliver oil in Houston by pipeline instead of by truck. So again, it lowers the price. The second thing the president could sign is a permission to develop more wells in the Gulf of Mexico off of Louisiana and Texas. That's about 400,000 barrels a day, and it is precisely what the governors of Texas and Louisiana have asked for. The third thing he could do is approve development of some areas of Alaska. That's 1,200,000 barrels a day. So in those three signatures, you would add 2,300,000 barrels a day to the United States. That, by the way, is the equivalent of the entire production of Iraq, just to give you a sense of scale. And that's 2,300,000 barrels staying at home. That's money we're not sending overseas. That's jobs we're creating here. And it's downward pricing pressure. Now, the next stage is you open up federal lands and you open up offshore. When I say federal lands, remember, we own 69% of Alaska. That's 1.5 times the size of Texas. So when you look at North Dakota, and you look at the size of North Dakota, and then put that in the middle of Alaska, and you say, if we got 24 billion barrels of oil now in North Dakota, what might we have in Alaska? We don't know, because Barack Obama in 2007 introduced a bill to stop the Geological Survey from inventorying our oil supplies. The left deeply doesn't want us to know how much oil we have, because it breaks up all their arguments. And all of a sudden it turns out we can have inexpensive oil. And if we have inexpensive oil, we have inexpensive gasoline. If we have inexpensive gasoline, you can buy the kind of car you want. You're not coerced into buying somebody else's car. Now, to illustrate all this, we're putting together sort of a little desk set that you'll be able to get at newt.org. And the desk set will it'll have over here, it'll have a bottle of algae and an Obama bumper sticker. And over here it'll have an oil derrick and a Gingrich bumper sticker. And under this one it'll say $10 a barrel. And under this one will say $2.50 a gallon, or $10 a gallon. Here it'll say $2.50 a gallon, and in the middle it'll say you choose. We just thought we'd make really vivid how big the choice is. Now, the pressure has already gotten so great in just 2 weeks that Dr. Chu announced, remember he's the Secretary of Anti-Energy, and Dr. Chu announced yesterday that he no longer favors European pricing for gasoline. Now, up until yesterday, I'll let you decide if you believe him or you think that's something he's saying to get through the election. But it was fascinating that as recently as a week ago, he said he was not in the business of lowering the price of gasoline. He was in the business of getting us to substitute other things, and he went off talking about battery breakthroughs and things like that. Now, I'm just giving you this background because what I want you to see is in area after area, I mean, you can take brain science, for example, where we have the potential for breakthroughs in Alzheimer's, in autism, in Parkinson's, in mental health. You can take other areas in terms of distance learning and the opportunity for every American to learn for their whole lifetime. You can take a whole range of possibilities where you suddenly get to a dramatically more dynamic, better country doing better things. And gasoline, in that sense, is just an example of the opportunities for us to create a better future. If we go all out, if we develop our oil and our natural gas supplies in this country, we will be dramatically independent of the Middle East. And let me just give you an example of how big a deal that could be. The Iranians right now are practicing closing the Straits of Hormuz, through which flows about 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil in the world. Now, in the short run, the guarantee against them closing it is the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force. But in the long run, what we ought to be able to say to them is, look, we're energy independent. We're producing our own oil. And the Europeans, the Chinese, the Indians, the Japanese had better get together because they have a problem in the Straits of Hormuz. We don't. And I think we can do that. And I'm not describing isolationism. I'm describing an America in the world based on strength, and an America in the world based on our self-sufficiency. And by keeping $500 billion a year at home, we rebuild jobs in America, we strengthen the dollar. And here's the last part of why this energy policy is a big deal. The people who developed North Dakota estimated that if we would develop offshore and we would develop federal lands, in the next generation, in the life of the youngest people who are here today, the total payments and royalties to the federal government will be between $16 and $18 trillion. Now that means if we could impose discipline in Washington, and I say this as somebody who, as Speaker of the House, helped balance the budget for 4 straight years, the only time in your lifetime we have balanced the budget for 4 straight years. If we could develop that kind of program where we instill discipline in Washington. So over here they balance the budget. And over here we set up a debt repayment fund, and all the royalty money goes into a debt repayment fund. That would mean, in the life of the youngest people at this meeting, that we could pay off the U.S. national debt. That's how big the change would be. And in the process, you get a double win. You no longer bow to a Saudi king, and you no longer worry about the Chinese, because you pay off all the debt. Now, I cite that because that's, in fact, the kind of future we want to give young people. We owe it to younger Americans, for our generation, to make the tough decisions so we can give them an America which is more prosperous, safer, and freer than the country we inherited. That requires really big decisions, and that requires that we think in terms of a 21st century conservatism that has new approaches and new solutions, that takes the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Federalist Papers and applies them to solving our problems, not just talking about them, and thinks through what is it that will get us back to a balanced budget, what is it that will return power to the states under the 10th Amendment, and frankly a lot of this applies then to Springfield, and how do you modernize the government of the state of Illinois so that it's not the most expensive pension system in the country, and it's not killing jobs in Illinois. I mean, this problem is true across all of our systems. It's not just Washington. We really have to have a very dramatic modernization of what we're doing if we're going to compete in the world. And I think these ideas are really important because I think, frankly, the world's economically very shaky. And I think we need to have an American strategy for America to be better off. So, with your help, that's the kind of aggressive program we want to launch. I've run campaigns before that involved big teams. The Contract with America campaign had over 350 candidates. We had the largest one-party increase in an off-year in American history, 9 million extra voters. It came out in 1994 over 1990. We won control for the first time in 40 years. We kept our word and we came back, and we were the first re-elected majority since 1928. So I think it's possible to design a campaign like this. I would ask, with your help, if I become the nominee, I will ask all of the Republican candidates to agree in the House and Senate that when they come back in January 3rd next year, they will stay in office, and we will repeal Obamacare. We will repeal the Dodd-Frank bill, which is killing small banks and small business and driving down the price of housing. And we will repeal Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a bill which has added cost to business without any kind of public gain. And so all three of those steps I'd like to have done by the time I'm sworn in on January 20th, so I could sign all three repeals on the very first day, so we could launch the new administration in a very aggressive job-creating, cost-cutting model. In addition, on the very first day, I'll issue a series of executive orders, the first of which will abolish all of the White House czars as of that moment. So we're talking about a very activist, very directed program. I need your help. We have over 175,000 donors now. Most of them are small donors. 95% of our donors give $250 or less. I called the other day to the person who was number 175,000, who turned out to live in Florida, and his name was Samuel Stamford. I actually called him and got him at home after he'd come home from treatment for cancer. He's currently unemployed. And one of the things we have at Newt.org is a place where you can give 1 gallon of Newt gas, which is $2.50. And he had seen me speak on C-SPAN or somewhere, and he liked the idea so much that he went in, and even though he's currently unemployed, he put down $2.50 as a citizen to be part of what we're doing. So we've really tried to offset. We don't have anything like the kind of money that Governor Romney has, and I understand he's going back for 2 more days of fundraising on Wall Street, which is in part at least a sign that Santorum and I have drained most of his current treasury. But he can raise money from billionaires. We raise money from middle-class people. And part of what's kept us afloat is the ability to do things on the internet that's very inexpensive. So I just have a couple of free things you can do if you'd like to help. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay. If everybody on Facebook, if you get a chance, go to your homepage and just put in Newt equals $2.50 a gallon gasoline. There are enough people here that your friends will pick it up off Facebook, and we're getting folks to do that all over the country. If you're on Twitter, if you would go to hashtag and put in hashtag 250gas. Now we have a whole bunch of folks doing that. If friends of yours say, okay, it's a nice slogan, I'd love $2.50 a gallon gasoline, but is he really serious? If they go to Newt.org, my first name, they will see that we have there's a 30-minute speech that's on video there that walks you through step by step how to in fact have an American energy program that enables us to be free of Saudi Arabia and that enables us to bring down the price of gasoline. So I think you'll find that useful. And any of your friends who'd like to donate, they can just go to Newt.org and donate. And we have 500 to 1,000 people every single day donating. This is a very challenging campaign. I think it's particularly challenging because I'm campaigning on very new ideas that are very different. The gasoline one is the first, and I've talked about, for example, brain science, which actually would both help millions of Americans with Alzheimer's and autism and Parkinson's and mental health, but it would also be an enormous financial gain for the country. I mean, if we could solve Alzheimer's, for example, just postponing it by 5 years, not curing it, just postponing it by 5 years, is probably worth as much as $6 to $8 trillion between now and 2050, and plus huge human costs. So there are a lot of ideas that we've been developing that are positive. Because of the price of gasoline, because it's on every street corner, because people see it every day, because they're reminded every time they fill up their own gas tank, this seems to be the issue that is really beginning to break through and getting people to pay attention. And then it gives us a chance to talk about the new technologies and the idea that none of this stuff, only in Washington, just as they don't get UPS and FedEx, they don't get the American Express security system, they don't understand the revolution in energy that's right around the corner. And so with your help, I hope to get enough attention to this through the primary season that people will begin to pick up on the idea that having a conservative dedicated to bringing new solutions and to using new science, new technology, new management to really break loose, so that we become once again the most productive country in the world with the most powerful economy, with the greatest manufacturing sector, and with complete energy sufficiency so that we don't have to worry about anybody ever again blackmailing us. I think that kind of campaign can go all the way, and I look forward to getting to Tampa with your help, and I appreciate you being here. Clista and I look forward very much to seeing each of you individually. Thank you very, very much.